Okay, well, thank you very much. And it is my pleasure to moderate this last session before lunch. I hope that everything will go well and we are not going to end up having extra time and not to be intervening between you and lunch. So I hope that everything will go well. So by way of introduction, political polarization and misinformation are rapidly eroding public trust in science. As we confront pressing global challenges such as climate change, global health, and food insecurity, nationalism and isolationism further impede the vital international cooperation needed to address these issues. Against this background, our panelists, representing regional networks and science academies from 5 continents, will share their views and experiences across various scientific fields to explore strategies for restoring trust in science. So we are pleased to have with us 6 distinguished panelists in this session. But given 1 hour time limit, I kindly request that each panelist limit their remarks to 6 minutes. This will allow, hopefully, a 20-minute questions and answers, as required by the rules of our session. I will also pose a question to each panelist to be answered within their 6-minute time frame. So it is my pleasure now to invite the first panelist, Helena Nader. She is joining us online. She is the president of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences. Helena, welcome. The question I would like to ask you to address is, how can we restore trust in science and scientists while safeguarding academic freedom?
Thank you so much for the question. I apologize for not being able to be in person with you people. And I want to thank the organizers for this panel discussion. I don't know how to get my slides, so how do I get them? So I have no idea. Are you listening? Okay, great. So, Sabina, can I pass on this next slide, please? I don't, how can I move then from here? It's hide captions, Q&A, race. It's not going on. Thank you so much. So, to rebuild trust in science in a changed geopolitical era, I want to initially highlight 3 interconnected themes that I believe are important for these discussions. The challenge that we face in the current global context, the central role of inclusion and diversity in strengthening trust, and the urgent question of how to defend both science and academic freedom. Next, please. We are in a global context that scientific institutions that initially were seen as neutral, stabilizing actors have become targets, and especially in political and ideological disputes. And these trends are not isolated. They are part of a broader international patterns in which science is weaponized and dismissed, not in the basis of evidence as we do as scientists, but as part of a large political battles. So, to rebuild trust in science, it's important that we have democracy. It's a democratic imperative to challenge. Thus, we as institutional have resilience, strong protections for researchers, and sustained public investments in science and education in order to further uh, move into the direction of uh, balancing this uh, this cost. And evidence-based discourse must be defended as foundation of democratic life. Next, please. For instance, in Brazil and in many countries in America, and I would say beyond, we are witnessing political polarization shaping public perceptions of science, budget cuts, and institutional attacks, and scientists becoming victims of online harassment and organized disinformation. In order to face this, next, please. We have scientific academies, and in my opinion, they have a unique responsibility. In moments of crisis, they can serve as mediators between science and society. They can articulate evidence with clarity and independence. They can defend institutions under attack, and they can help rebuild scientific trust, civic trust in science by speaking with their moral authority. Next, please. Nevertheless, we need to have inclusion and diversity, and this is a fundamental point. Trust in science is not by communication alone. It also depends on who produces science and whose knowledge is being recognized. A significant part of global mistrust, in my opinion, arises from structural exclusion, specifically of voice from the global south and historically marginalized communities. If science continues to reproduce global inequalities, it risks losing legitimacy. We must therefore move forward on international scientific ecosystem where we have diverse epistemologies. We look at the indigenous and local knowledge systems, and they are valued. We have gender and racial perspectives, and representation is embedded in decision making at all levels. If we go to publications nowadays, the costs of publications for many countries in the globe are outrageous. So, next, please. Next. And why representation matters? It matters because trust linked to who does science. We have to have everybody in order to have trust. And we need to finish with this structural inequalities. We need to move forward into that direction. Next, please. So, to rebuild trust and academic freedom, I would say that the central question is defense science requires ensuring that scientific advice and communication cannot be easily captured by political interests. We need strong institutional and societal safeguards, such as independent national science advisory mechanisms, clear codes of conduct for public communication, ensuring transparency, accountability, and integrity, and protection of academic freedom, which is essential not only for scientific progress, but as well as for democracy. But national action is not enough. Next, please. We must also strengthen international solidarity among academies. A global protective architecture can help us issue, for instance, a rapid collective response to misinformation, support scientists under threat, and share best practice. Such alliances simplify our voices and increase the resilience of our institutions. They create a space where political pressures cannot easily be silenced and that voice of science can be heard. Next, please. Defending science, in my opinion, is equal to defending democracy. In the end, the message is simple but profound. We must invest in institutional strength, diversity, representation, and international solidarity. We must communicate with honesty, but also listen with humility. And above all, we must ensure that science continues to serve society openly, inclusively, and responsibly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helena. Our next panelist, the second one, is Karin Istere. I hope I pronounced the name right. And Karin is the co-chair of the Inter-American Network of Academies of Science. Karin, if you can also deal with this question during your talk, what can scientists and science academies do to promote trust in science and science-based policy? Thank you.
Oops. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you, everyone from IAP and also the Egyptian Academy. And Elena, it's so nice to see you. I wish you could be here with us. So I would like to make 2 points today in the next few minutes. They pertain to the importance of cooperation and reciprocity in relationships and in the importance of communication and building trust. And I'll do this from a comparative perspective because although I am here representing IANUS, the title of the session about resilient knowledge systems led me to think about the Egyptian knowledge systems. And as a primatologist who studies wild primates, I was drawn to the baboons in Egyptian history, where they have held godly attributes of writing, wisdom, magic, and the moon. And this is according to the Grand Egyptian Museum, which I was delighted to have the opportunity to visit. So for thinking about primates, whoops, we skipped a slide there. From a comparative perspective, we can think about trust in science because it involves a relationship of trust with scientists. And these relationships are embedded in the social and cultural networks that, just like with other primates, require opportunities for interactions, an exchange of benefits, and oftentimes transactional exchanges. So primates like the macaques in the left-hand image of this slide exchange grooming for access to food and other resources, for friendship and defense. The capuchin monkeys in the middle cooperate with one another to obtain food, and if the food that collaborators receive is not of comparable quality or equitably distributed, the cooperation among these monkeys becomes antagonistic. And the Moriki monkeys on the right, which are the subjects of my own research, live in peaceful societies where social affiliations among networks are the basis for everything they do. In these primates and other species of animals, failure to meet the expectations of reciprocity results in the loss of trust, the breakdown of cooperation, and can even lead to hostility and aggression. And this is why building trust in science means building trust in scientists. And we can do that not only with the policymakers, as we've heard about with many of the other speakers in this meeting, but also with the general public, our neighbors and members of our communities and social networks. And in both cases, as with primates, we need opportunities for interactions, and we need to work with to be sure that the benefits of science are equitably distributed. My second point is about communication, which is essential for trust as well as for all kinds of cooperative relationships. And we know that to succeed in communicating about science, we need to make it accessible. And one way to making it accessible is through the narratives that are socially and culturally relevant. So the idea of building trust in science is also about building trust in scientists. And it brings me to another comparative study, this time with people, more than about 72,000 respondents from 68 countries. And I thought this study was really interesting to mention. And if you can see on the two greenish looking bars, summing those up on the left hand of the slide, in the first 4 questions, more than 50% of respondents thought that scientists should in some way interact with, communicate, or influence policymakers or policy. But even more of the respondents, more than 80% of them, thought that scientists should communicate about science with the general public. So it seems like people around the world want to hear from us, and I think this is a good sign. Another element of this study was that there's a lot of variation across countries, and the data were collected in 22 to 23, but I thought it was interesting that at the time, at least, Egypt, where we are today, was the country with the strongest public trust in scientists. And maybe even more important or interesting in a general sense, certainly encouraging, was that 3/4 of all respondents believed that scientific research methods are the best way to find out if something is true or false. So it seems that most people want to hear from scientists, and they generally trust our methods. So that brings me to my answer to Mohammed's question about what scientists and science academies can do to promote trust in science and science-based policy. So I would say the first thing is we need to remain optimistic. Most people are interested in hearing from us, and they believe they believe in our methods. This is a good thing. We need to work with that. Second, we can expand on the best practices that many scientific academies and societies have already developed and are developing about how scientists can better communicate with policymakers, to include how we can better communicate with the public. And for this, we need to keep in mind what we've learned from other primates, which is about the importance of creating opportunities, of making what is important about science be relevant to what people need and want, and to making the benefits accessible in an equitable and fair way. And finally, also learning from the primates, we can strengthen the science networks that promote cooperation, not only among scientists, but also between scientists and other parts of our communities and networks. And this is one reason why I think that IAP regional networks like IANIS, which I represent, are so important. There are so many global challenges that need global collaboration among scientists today. But as with other primates, there is still great value in our local and regional networks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Our third speaker is Norbert Unkono, and he is the president of the Network of African Science Academies, NASAC, until I think the end of this year, because he will be the immediate past president after this year. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to ask you a question to be included in your comments. And my question is, how can governance reforms institutionalize trust in science by ensuring accountability, inclusivity, and equitable participation in the knowledge ecosystem? If you can address that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, IAP and Egyptian Academy for organizing this meeting. Dear colleagues, we gather today to reflect on a question that has become central to our future. Can society still trust science, and can science still merit that trust? This is not a matter of public perception alone. It is a question of legitimacy, power, and the architecture of knowledge in our century. The Senegalese philosopher Suleiman Bachir Dan offers a profound guide when he writes that to universalize reason is not to make it uniform, but to make it shareable. Trust in science will endure only if knowledge itself becomes shareable, inclusive, and accountable. So we live now in a very complex century, a century of turbulence. We live in a moment where misinformations compete with evidence, where technological acceleration outpaces ethical reflection, and where global inequities distort who produces and who benefits from knowledge. These crises reveal a deep tension, the gap between the production of knowledge and the production of meaning. As Kwame Nkrumah declared in 1963, science must serve the liberation of men. Today, liberation means enabling society not only to receive knowledge, but to understand it, question it, and co-create it. Trust as a strategic resource. Trust is not a soft sentiment. It is an institutional asset, as vital as funding or infrastructure. It rests on three interdependent pillars. First, cognitive trust. Believe in the methods and validity of science. Institutional trust. Believe in the integrity of scientific bodies. Social trust. Believe that science serves the public good. When trust erodes, policy loses direction. When it flourishes, science becomes a source of legitimacy, cohesion, and foresight. But why trust has eroded? Trust has weakened due to a politicization of expertise, opaque decision-making, algorithm-driven fragmentation, and historical inequities, particularly between the global north and the global south. The French philosopher Edgar Morin reminds us, we must learn to navigate in an ocean of uncertainties through archipelagos of certitudes. So a resilient knowledge system does not deny uncertainty, it organizes it. Building a policy agenda and trust. So I propose 5 strategic priorities for governments, academies, and global science institutions. First, institutionalize science policy interfaces. So transparent Accountable advisory council must be standard, not exception, across all regions. Second, reinforce research integrity in inclusive open science. Openness must be coupled with equity, or it reproduces hierarchies, as Crane Soden remind us. Third, invest in science communication and literacy. Trust grows through dialogue, not proclamation. Scientists must be trained to communicate uncertainty and ethics. Fourth, promote equity in global knowledge system. A trustworthy system is one where Africa, Asia, and Latin America are co-authors, not consumers of global science. As Ngugi wa Thiong'o writes, the power of knowledge lies not in domination, but in liberation. Fifth, integrate ethical foresight into policy cycles. Drawing on Hans Jonas, we must ensure that our technological choices remain compatible with the permanence of genuine human life. So, the African opportunity. Africa is not a latecomer, but a laboratory of a new models of inclusive science. Programs led by NASAC, its member academies, and continental universities already demonstrate that trust can be built through capacity, cooperation, and co-creation. A proverb teaches, if you want to go far, go together. Trust to travels far only through collective stewardship. Towards a global covenant for knowledge. What we ultimately need is a global covenant for knowledge, a shared commitment to steward science as a public good grounded in transparency, equity, responsibility. As Paul Ricoeur beautifully observed, trust is a fragile miracle. Its preservation requires institutions that embody justice, humility, and reciprocity. In conclusion, trust in science is more than a prerequisite for effective policy. It is a cornerstone of societal resilience. If knowledge is to remain a compass in this area of transformation, it must be credible, inclusive, and human. And as Nelson Mandela taught us, education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. Let us add, trusted knowledge is the most powerful foundation on which to rebuild it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can immediately see that my panelists are very well disciplined, so I don't need to intervene. And Marcos here is trying to keep the time. So our fourth panelist is Liz Avra. Liz. And Liz is the president of the European Academy Science Advisory Council, ESAC in short. Can I just also ask you to address one question while you talk? And the question is, how can scientific organizations build trust and resilience in knowledge systems while ensuring independence and promoting collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to this session and also for putting up a very interesting and important topic. So may I have the first slide? So I'm the incoming president of ESAC from January 1st, 2026. And I would like to just briefly mention, if I can have the first slide of my presentation. Oh, it's there. Okay, sorry. So ISAC is the European Academy Science Advisory Council. And just to mention how we work, we were founded in 2001, so we have 25 years anniversary at the moment. And we are a mechanism for mobilizing Europe's best scientific minds on public policy issues. And we are providing science-based advice on issues of importance to European policymakers and civil society. So for this, we're building on expertise, scientific excellence, independence, and impartiality, free from political and economic interest. At the moment, we are 29 member academies, and since 2024, the Austrian Academy has been the host academy. We are hosting then 25 national science academies of EU member states, plus the national academies of Norway, Switzerland, and the UK. And we are, and also the Academy of Science, Academia Europea. And also ALEA and FIM have observer status in our collaborative networks. And we also the region network of IRP Global Partnership. So we're representing that. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. We have core objectives and outputs. So we have assessing pressing scientific and societal questions solely based on scientific evidence. And with this, we try to enhance the European policy development and implementation by convening knowledge and giving advice. So we have a bottom-up mechanism. We are trying to seeking questions and answers based on what is needed. And we focus on bioscience and public health, energy, and environment. And by this, we're providing an independent platform for convening scientists, policymakers, and the public. The output that we produce are evidence-based policy reports, and these are ratified by all the member academies and the EU member states, and we are communicating with the EU member states, and we produce then policy recommendations for this. So you all got, I would like you to visit the website if you're interested in really what we're doing. We have a successful microsite where it's showing a lot of the reports and the policy documentations we have. And you all got a postcard yesterday where you can look into this more in detail. But when it comes to trust in science, there are three key issues that we in ISAC are really looking at. And it's the first key issue is the collaboration across academy network and partnership. And in the challenging times we're facing today, we see that this is a very important part of our task. The effective regional and interregional cooperation is crucial to prevent fragmentation and isolation among organizations, strengthening collaboration across network, foster knowledge exchange, resource sharing, and coordinated action, and that's ensuring that efforts are aligned and impactful rather than dispersed. And this is a core issue for ISAC. A second key issue is public engagement and evidence-based thinking. And this is important to strengthen evidence-based decision-making. Science must be accessible and understandable to all citizens. Promoting critical thinking and scientific literacy empowers the public to question claims and demand evidence from politicians and policymakers. And this is encouraging a culture of asking for evidence, and this ensures accountability and fosters informed societal dialogue. And then it comes to the third key issue, the trust in science and resilience, which I will elaborate a bit more on. Building trust in science requires both internal strength and external credibility. International transparency, clarity, and rigorous quality assurance are essential to maintain resilience within the scientific community. Externally, trust grows when science acts as an independent and impartial knowledge broker, fostering long-term relationship with stakeholders and policymakers. So continuous engagement and clear communication are key to ensuring science remains a trusted foundation for decision-making. Trust in science is essential for effective governance and societal resilience. Crises such as COVID-19, biodiversity loss, and the climate change have shown that scientific advice must be credible, transparent, inclusive, and independent to support a democratic decision-making and societal resilience. However, misinformation, politicization, and lack of openness threaten this trust. And we're seeing this a lot these days with fake news, social media, uncorrected podcasts, etc. Trust in science is the cornerstone of effective governance and societal resilience. So why does this trust matter? It matters because science informs policy on complex issues like climate change, health, and technology. Without trust, scientific advice risks being ignored or politicized, undermining evidence-based decision. And trust is not automatic. It requires active engagement between scientists, policymakers, and the public. So there are key challenges. Misinformation and polarization erode confidence in science. And 3 examples is important. It's the oversimplification of science policy relationship, it's erosion of trust due to misinformation and politicization, and the past scientific harms and lack of transparency fuels criticism. When it comes to the policy agenda recommendation, we need transparency and accountability. We need to communicate the uncertainties clearly and describe how gaps will be addressed. Make the process of integrating science into policy visible and open, but also make advisory process open and traceable. We also need an inclusive engagement. We need to involve a diverse publics and historically marginalized groups in scientific process. We need to recognize indigenous knowledge and lived experience alongside technical evidence, as was exemplified yesterday by the pastoralism and grassland session. Another example is the EU Horizon 2020 funded citizen science project and science festivals to engage the public in research and innovation. As we've also heard earlier today, science communication is also very important. We need to improve clarity and consistency to avoid mixed messaging. We need to stand together in this area, and we need to promote scientific literacy and open science principle. And this was also discussed yesterday with a phrase as open as possible, as closed as necessary. And here's also an example of UNESCO's recommendation on open science from 2021. It sets global standards for transparency and accessibility. Yet this is very challenging these days, where we have such an unstable geopolitical conditions. Another important topic is institutional integrity. To safeguard independence of scientific advice from political or commercial pressures, scientists should act as honest brokers, not advocates for specific policy. And here again, the academies and academic collaboration and networks plays an important role. So we need a resilient knowledge system. We need to build systems that can withstand crisis and misinformation. We need to foster long-term trust through education and intergenerational engagement. The underlying principle here is that trust is earned, not assumed. It requires both epistemic quality, sound evidence, and ethical conduct, fairness and openness. Strengthening in science policy society interface is key for this resistance. So to end and answer your question, the call to action would be that governments, research institutions, and civil society must collaborate to embed transparency, inclusivity, and integrity into knowledge system. And this is essential for evidence-based policy making and democratic resilience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And our fifth panelist is Francis Andre Ullman. And He's vice president of for the International Affairs Academy de Sciences. Is that correct? Okay. And the question I want to ask you is how can social sciences help citizens use scientific data to drive change and shape new knowledge? A very important question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And I'm not a researcher in social sciences, so that's maybe why I'm asking questions about this. As you heard, I'm a member of an Academy of Sciences, as many of us are here. This Academy of Sciences is in Europe, and within Europe it's in France. And therefore, everything I will say, of course, reflects a view from a French scientist. And although I'm glad to hear some optimistic views regarding trust in science, I'd like to share with you two concerns regarding this topic that to me look as robust trends that are established now at the 21st century and on which we should try to think deeper. In 2023, in the summer, urban riots in France led to unprecedented damage of education centers and public libraries. These very shocking observations, unfortunately, were consistent with the higher feeling of insecurity among teachers than in most other professional activities. 12% of the teachers in France that were interrogated reported having been threatened by pupils or their parents in the recent years. That is why I think that the decreased trust in science, if it exists and it does exist, is part of a larger process in which the status of knowledge is changing. There is a decreased understanding of what knowledge is about in Europe. I don't know for the other parts of the world. And because of this, it leads to a distrust of institutions that provide this knowledge. So here are my two concerns. One of the main changes that occurred in this 21st century is the substitution of information for knowledge due to the widespread communication via social networks. Originally, forming an opinion for a citizen on a scientific or a technical issue required an effort to access someone with the appropriate knowledge. It was through school teachers, academics, journalists from specialized newspapers or radio or television stations that citizens got informed of the available knowledge. These mediators, who were bearers of knowledge, were identifiable by the professional skills required to do their job, so they ensure the quality and reliability of the information communicated to citizens. The short-circuiting of these mediators via an immediate and easy communication through social networks have dissociated information from knowledge. Information now takes precedence over knowledge, which is drowned out by the expression of multiple opinions presented as information available to other citizens making their own choices as a consumer would do in a supermarket. There is a urgent need to explain through social networks that knowledge is not an opinion among others. To this end, we should set communication tools similar to those the influencers use. The next concern is the following that is really, really obvious in the Western world, as one would say in the past century, that is basically Europe and the US, is this belief, this deep belief that democracy is the political system that offers the best conditions for the development of science. The links between freedom of conscience and freedom of initiative, which allows creativity to flourish, is commonly attributed to the political liberalism advocated by the philosophers of the Enlightenment in the 18th century. Indeed, since that time, economic liberalism developed hand in hand with academic freedom, with an unprecedented acceleration of scientific discoveries in the Western world. Democracy has thus been understood as a prerequisite for the development of science and the wealth of nations. However, it should be noted that the introduction of the major technical innovations into our societies, all resulting from advances in scientific knowledge, have occurred de facto and not de jure as a quasi-spontaneous change in our environment. None of our societies have ever decided to use electricity or to run railways or cars. The entire 20th century passively witnessed a dynamic of technical progress long associated with the idea of social progress. So if we accept the definition of a democratic space as a space for collective deliberation, we had to wait until the 80s of the 20th century to see some political parties, and these were the ecological parties in Europe, that started to introduce the issues of innovation and science by questioning and criticizing some of the major innovations derived from new scientific knowledge, like the ability to produce targeted gene modifications, the so-called GMOs, or the questioning of the use of nuclear energy, which is banned in several European countries. Many scientists consider that democracies have trouble in managing technical evolution because they witness other countries where there is not democracy in the agenda, and they are fast progressing in science and innovation. And many scientists now consider that democracy may weaken the public understanding of science-based decisions to global challenges. I know that this is something that may look very pessimistic, but at the moment, if we don't see this face to face, we will miss the point. We need to consider that the fact that there is not a natural convergence between scientific progress and democratic debate should not be considered as something that weakens each side, but at the moment, it's likely that it works. The feeling for democracy in the US, in European countries, the feeling for the future of democracy is decreasing. In France, more than 30%, close to 40% of the citizens in a poll where people were asked, do you think democracy is the political system that we deserve to have? More than 1/3 answered that they were not sure. So with this trust in science is in difficulty in places where it used not to be a problem. And with this very pessimistic message as compared to what I heard, I'll leave just one take-home message. We need a better integration of social sciences with experimental sciences, medicine, and technology. Because at the moment, and the way our networks are organized reflect this in part, there is not the proper integration of the whole spectrum of knowledge to face global challenges in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, these are really challenging questions. And I think one addition to what you have said is there is a great concern about misinformation that comes from our scientific community, from scientists, and some of them well-established scientists. How to handle this? I don't know. I have no immediate answer, but I think it's something that we have to be concerned with, like what is happening in Europe and North America. Okay, so this might be something that we might need to address later on when we have some time for questions and answers. The final panelist, Francis Seprovic. And Francis is the Foreign Secretary of the Australian Academy of Sciences. And the question to you, Francis, is how can governments and the science academies collaborate to enhance public understanding and build resilience against misinformation? Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Hassan. One of the dangers of going last is that you're going to repeat a lot of what everybody's said already. And although I am on the executive board of ASA, I was asked originally to concentrate on the Australian viewpoint. So I'm going to talk from the viewpoint of Australia and pretend I'm not repeating too much. The question of trust and resilience in science systems has never been more pressing. Globally, the foundations of science are being tested, not just by accelerating environmental, social, and geopolitical change, but by a growing readiness to cast doubt on evidence, expertise, and even the institutions that safeguard truth. So hopefully, yeah. So in Australia, we are fortunate to enjoy relatively high public trust in science, but trust is not static. It's not a permanent guarantee. It is a relationship, one that must be earned, maintained, and demonstrated through action. I was asked to talk about safeguarding integrity in Australian science. And at the heart of that relationship is integrity. The Australian Academy of Science holds that safeguarding the trustworthiness of our research is among our highest national priorities. We build trust slowly, but it can be lost in an instant. A single high-profile failure, whether through misconduct or mismanagement, can erode confidence not just in one institution, but across our entire science system. That is why we need a stronger, more coherent national integrity architecture. Today, our mechanisms are fragmented, distributed across institutions, funding bodies, and existing committees. Many do their job well, but as a system, we lack the independence, consistency, and transparency that the public increasingly expects. These are not luxuries, these are essentials. And as we were asked, why does this matter? Well, we know that when public trust wavers, the costs are real. Scientific advice becomes harder for governments to act upon. Communities may hesitate to adopt new technologies. Cross-border collaborations, I think I missed a slide. All right, I probably did. Well, we won't worry. We'll just keep going. So what I was up to, that communities may hesitate to adopt new technologies. Cross-border collaborations and data sharing become more difficult. And in times of crisis, whether a pandemic or public emergency, our ability to respond is weakened. Trust in science is not merely nice to have. It is a national capability, a foundation for economic vitality, social cohesion, and global collaborations. I think this is the wrong talk. This is the talk from tomorrow. So I've got the wrong slides there. Anyway, I was wondering why it didn't match what I was saying. Yeah. So anyway. Oops. So while we're finding the slides, I'll keep going because really they're just repeating what I'm reading out. So what does Australia need? The Academy strongly supports establishing an independent national research integrity body. This body should investigate allegations of serious breaches impartially, set and oversee consistent national standards, ensure transparency and public reporting, protect researchers, including early career and whistleblowers, and embed responsible research practices across the system. Such a body would signal clearly integrity is not optional, it is foundational. Our view is straightforward. The credibility of science rests not only on what we discover, but on how we conduct that work. An underlying principle, trust must be earned. We cannot mandate public trust. It must be earned day by day through open, responsible, and fair scientific culture. That means acknowledging uncertainty, correcting mistakes, engaging meaningfully with communities, and safeguarding our independence from external pressures. So as the Academy, we are working to model these values. For example, the David Vow Award, named for a fellow who championed scientific integrity, recognises those who act courageously, who foster integrity in their organisation, not just through their research, but through their conduct. By celebrating not just scientific excellence, but excellence of character, we reinforce what we truly value as a scientific community. I was also asked a moderator question: what is the single most important action countries can take to strengthen trust in their science systems? From Australia's experience, the most important action is to build visible structures of integrity. Independence matters, transparency matters, consistency matters. When the public knows that research is conducted and overseen with impartiality and rigour, trust can deepen even in turbulent times. So in closing, I'll come back to your question later, but in closing, trust and resilience in science are not abstract ideals. They are built through institutional design, daily practice, and leadership that places integrity at the centre of what we do. As academies, we play a special role. We are independent, we are trusted, and we bridge disciplines, generations, and nations. If we commit together with courage and clarity to building robust integrity mechanisms and to communicating openly and honestly, we can strengthen not only our own national systems, but science globally. So Mohammed asked me this question, how we can fight misinformation. And we need scientific academies to be seen as trusted, independent bodies of expertise and to communicate effectively. So, for example, the Australian Academy of Science role in response to COVID-19. The Australian Academy of Science has 2.5 million followers on social media, but a few less today because the ban on under-16s came into effect. Our Facebook page has over 2.1 million likes. And as part of IAP, we can work together to counteract the spread of misinformation. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, I received information from the organizers that we can continue with another, I think, roughly 10 minutes, right? So I have a number of questions to ask, but I think I will leave it now to the audience because there's not that much time. So I would open the floor now for questions from you, please.
Okay, thank you for this fruitful presentation. Actually, we often talk about the trust of science as about top-to-down concept, that people must be trusted to our knowledge, but there is some exceptional cases, for example, local farmers who have their own all the traditional knowledge and that is object يعني so يعني exceptional to our knowledge or to high-tech knowledge, for example, climate models and new fertilization technology and so on. So I would like to ask about how we can rebuild our, redesign our trust knowledge system and how to evaluate our KPIs system to be يعني local or specific for this key person, especially for trust, social trust. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to respond to that? Who would like to respond to this question? No? Yeah,
Hello.
go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating that in the Australian university systems, for instance, you know, we're bringing about ethics and integrity training way too late, but it's something that we need to do, and not just at the graduate level, but at the undergraduate level. I also think a good thing would be, as was mentioned earlier today, to have the equivalent of something like a Hippocratic oath where you sign that you're going to adhere to these principles. Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you very much. I want to challenge you by suggesting you may have missed something, and that is that trust in science is entirely context specific. So scientists who talk about the Higgs boson or gravitational waves or some new discovery in biology or medicine are trusted completely. The real challenge, I think, is that Thomas Malthus was right, and at a population of the planet of over 8 billion people is exceeding the sort of productive capacity of the planet. And that means that the interests of present generations are not aligned with the interests of the future. And so the challenge, I think, is that when scientists start telling people that they're going to have to change the way they live their lives, stop eating meat, all the other things, that is not trusted. And that's where the interface between science and policy is so difficult, because politicians duck the issue by saying, either we're following the science or we don't trust it, rather than saying, well, it's all about the discount rate for human generations, I'm afraid, which is too high. Hypothesis.
Okay. Quick answer? Please comment.
May I? Mohammed?
It's not working.
May I answer?
Yes, Helena.
Yeah, I like the question a lot, and some of the examples are good, but I'm going to give back some other examples. What is going on in the United States nowadays, where the Minister for Health doesn't trust vaccines, is something that goes against the point. So I think we need to have lots of inputs to really move forward, because the same government, for instance, Trump's in the beginning, in the first government, he gave money to the pharmaceutical companies to produce RNA vaccines, and now RNA research is forbidden. So I think politics is really doing lots of bad to science, and we need to face that. I don't know how to handle, but I want to just interpose.
Thank you. You have a now?
If I could just answer to Mark only for the first part of your comments, when you mentioned, which is absolutely true, that the issue of trust in science is very country or territory dependent. I do believe that there are places in the world where trust in science is steadily increasing, whereas it's collapsing in other places. Nevertheless, the first of my two concerns, which is the confusion between information and knowledge, because it's transborder, will hit also these places where trust is increasing, and at some point there will be an issue here. Now, of course, the question that I mentioned on purpose between democracy and science is historically determined in Europe. And I know democratic countries which are not in Europe, in which the question is not raised in the same way. So we agree on this aspect, of course.
Okay. Last question.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask among the panelists, and if not in the room, a question about the role of young academies to their knowledge, actually trying to address the question of misinformation and perhaps correction of incorrect information being circulated on social networks. Why the young academies? And presumably these are consisting of individuals, comprising individuals who are of the younger generations, and it is their future, not our future, that is at stake. So is there a significant consideration and work and active strategy development from the really junior scientists through the work of young academies in trying to get a grip on restoring some trust in science when it is the result of damage caused by, indeed, incorrect information as opposed to knowledge?
I think this is an excellent question, and it's one of the things that I had in mind to ask. I think what is really needed, frankly, from the young academies, whether the Global Young Academy or network of young academies, and indeed also the regional academies of science and also IAP itself, is I think it's an appropriate opportunity now to establish a well-designed platform that will address issues like mistrust in science, issues that come out of a sudden, and then all the academies are quiet because they're not organized themselves. So if we do have platforms that can really address this rapid response to combat misinformation, I think that will really be quite helpful, both from the young academies and also from well-established networks of academies. Anybody else wants to respond to this? Okay.
I can just mention that I had this in mind when I was mentioning that we should try to find people who are well adapted to social networks to use the same type of communication system as the influencers, because these people are able to understand each other better. And what I don't know if any network has been doing this yet, but we know there are blogs, there are a number of individuals who are speaking for science in these networks. And I'm not sure anyone has proposed yet that these people could gather in a place, as we're gathering now, to try to see how they can, in a way, try to coordinate their action when they are discussing in the networks. That's something that networking these people would be a good idea.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid our time is up. So I would like really to thank our panelists for a wonderful job they have done. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank you for your patience. I think lunch has been ready for the last 50 minutes. So please go ahead and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.